My captain told me to wait for backup. He said Richard Walton wasn't just a man, but a mountain with a crown of shadows. Naturally, I ignored him. Now I'm standing in a room that smells like expensive scotch and the kind of raw animalistic power that makes your skin itch. I have a pair of silver shackles in my hand and a warrant for the most powerful alpha king in the tri-state area. He's looking at me like I'm a particularly interesting snack, and I'm realizing my fierce detective persona might have just bitten off more than it can chew. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to arrest him. But as he stands up, I realize the law doesn't mean much to someone who makes his own rules. Chapter 1. The Silver Trap. The rain is drumming against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Walton estate, a rhythmic, heavy sound that matches the pounding in my chest. I didn't knock. Professionals don't knock when they're serving a warrant for territorial overreach. I kicked the double oak doors open, my tactical boots silent on the plush Persian rug, and found him. Richard Walton. He's standing by the window, his back to me. Even from behind, the man is a problem. His shoulders are broad enough to have their own zip code, draped in a charcoal suit that looks like it was painted onto his frame. There's no magical glow, no shimmering aura of a king, just the sheer, heavy weight of a predator who knows he's at the top of the food chain. Richard Walton, I say, and my voice is steadier than I feel. You're under arrest for the unauthorized expansion of the northern wilds. Hands where I can see them. He doesn't move. For a second, I think he might actually be a statue. Then he lets out a low, vibrating hum that I feel in my molars. "Detective Gray," he rumbles. He doesn't turn around. "You're late. I expected you 20 minutes ago. Did the rain slow you down? Or was it the courage failing in your knees?" "My knees are fine, and my timing is perfect," I snap. I'm known as the wolf breaker because I don't flinch, but the way the air in this room seems to thicken around him is making it hard to breathe. He's not even looking at me, and yet I feel like I'm being hunted. "You're alone," he notes, finally turning. He's even more imposing from the front. His face is all sharp angles and stubble, his eyes a deep, stormy brown. No supernatural light, just a gaze so intense it feels like a physical touch. He doesn't look like a criminal. He looks like a man who owns the air I'm currently gasping for. "I don't need a squad to handle one wolf," I say, stepping deeper into the room. This is my reckless choice. I should stay by the door. I should wait for the sirens. But my pride is a living thing, and it wants to see this man's composure break. I pull the silver shackles from my belt. They aren't magical, just heavy, cold, and designed to suppress the physical strength of a shifter. "Hands. Now." Richard actually smiles. It's not a kind smile. It's the look of a man who just found a toy he really likes. He starts walking toward me, his stride slow and rhythmic. He isn't rushing, he's encroaching. "You think those little trinkets can hold me, Anika? I think you're going to find out." I don't wait for him to reach me. I lunge forward, a move designed to catch him off guard, and snap the first cuff onto his right wrist. I'm fast, the best in the department. But Richard is something else entirely. He doesn't dodge. He meets me halfway. Before I can even register the warmth of his skin, his hand closes around my wrist. It's like being caught in a vice made of heated velvet. He's not hurting me, but the sheer strength in his grip makes my tactical training feel like a joke. "A bold move," he whispers, his breath hitting my ear and sending a traitorous shiver down my spine. "But you've always been a bit too eager to lock things down, haven't you?" In one fluid motion, He twists the silver cuffs in my hand. My own momentum works against me. I try to pull back, but he's a wall of muscle, unmoving and relentless. Click. The sound is deafening in the quiet room. I look down, my heart stopping. The silver cuff isn't on his wrist alone. It's snapped firmly around my left wrist. And the other end? Click. It's locked onto his right. I yank my arm back, but I only succeed in pulling myself flush against his chest. He's solid, radiating a heat that makes the rain outside feel like ice. I look up at him, my breath hitching as I realize I've just tethered myself to the most dangerous man in the city. "What are you doing?" I hiss, my face inches from his. Richard doesn't look weak. He doesn't look apologetic. He looks down at me with a terrifying, absolute certainty, his free hand coming up to trace the line of my jaw with a thumb that feels like fire. "You wanted me in custody, detective," he rumbles, his voice a low growl of satisfaction. "Now you've got me. But the thing about silver is, once it's locked, only one of us has the key." He leans in closer, his scent of cedar and wild earth filling my senses until I can't think. "And I don't think I'm ready to let you go just yet." I reach for my belt, for the key I know I put there, but my fingers find nothing but empty leather. Richard's eyes darken as he watches my realization dawn. He hasn't just cuffed us together, he's completely flipped the script, and I'm starting to realize that being his prisoner is a lot more intimate than I ever bargained for. I'm still trying to process the fact that I'm physically bound to him when he starts to walk, practically dragging me toward the elevator that leads to his private residence. "Where are we going?" I demand, trying to plant my feet. "Home, Anika," he says, not even breaking his stride. We have a very long night ahead of us. Chapter 2. The Vertical Den. The elevator doors slide shut with a whisper that sounds like a death sentence or a wedding march. At this point, I can't tell the difference. We're standing in a space roughly the size of a coat closet, and because I'm currently shackled to a man who seems to be constructed entirely of solid granite and bad intentions, I have no choice but to stand so close that I can feel the heat radiating off him like a furnace. My captain always said, "Gray, your impulsiveness is going to get you into a situation you can't shoot your way out of." Well, joke's on him. I didn't even bring a gun to this disaster. Just my pride and a pair of silver cuffs that are currently making a mockery of my career. "You're staring, Anika," Richard rumbles. I look up. His eyes are fixed on the digital floor display, but I can see the slight curve of a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'm not staring. I'm assessing the threat level of my prisoner." "Is that what I am?" He shifts his weight, and the silver chain between our wrists rattles. It's a small sound, but in the silence of the elevator, it feels like a thunderclap. He turns his head slowly, his gaze dropping to my lips before meeting my eyes. "Because from where I'm standing, you're the one being led into my territory." "This is a temporary tactical setback," I snap, though my heart is doing a frantic tap dance against my ribs. The moment my backup realizes I haven't checked in, this whole building will be crawling with officers. "They won't come," Richard says simply. There's no arrogance in his tone, just a flat, undeniable truth. My guards are polite, but they're very thorough. And frankly, detective, I think you know you didn't tell a soul where you were going. You wanted the glory of bringing in the Alpha King all by yourself. I hate that he's right. I hate even more that his scent, that intoxicating mix of cedarwood, cold rain, and something purely, dangerously male, is starting to muddle my tactical brain. I should be thinking about the lock mechanism. I should be looking for a way to trip him. Instead, I'm wondering if his skin is as hot as it looks. The elevator dings, and the doors open directly into his penthouse. It's not a house, it's a fortress made of glass and dark wood. The entire city is laid out below us, a carpet of twinkling lights obscured by the lashing rain. It's beautiful, expensive, and utterly isolated. Richard steps out, and because I'm literally attached to his arm, I have to follow. He doesn't jerk the chain. He doesn't have to. He just moves with a slow, predatory grace that makes it impossible not to match his pace. He leads me toward a massive kitchen island that looks like it was carved from a single block of black marble. "Are you hungry?" he asks, as if we're on a first date instead of a territorial dispute. "I'm hungry for the key to these cuffs," I reply, leaning against the marble and trying to look bored. It's a struggle when my arm is being held at a slight angle because he's a good foot taller than me. Richard reaches into a bowl of fruit and pulls out an apple. He doesn't use a knife. He just grips it in his free hand and snaps it in half with a sickeningly easy show of strength. He offers me a piece, his eyes never leaving mine. "You're very strong," I mutter, taking the piece of apple because my blood sugar is actually crashing from the adrenaline. Is that the Alpha King special, being able to crush produce? "It's a byproduct of being what I am," he says, taking a bite of his own half. The way his throat moves when he swallows is distracting. "And what I am, Anika, is a man who doesn't like to be told no, especially by a woman who looks as good in tactical gear as you do." I choke slightly on the apple. Is this where the intimidate the witness part of the evening begins? Because I've heard better pickup lines from guys I've thrown in the back of a squad car. Richard chuckles, a low, gravelly sound that vibrates in the air. He moves closer, pinning me between his body and the marble counter. He doesn't touch me with his free hand, but the proximity is enough to make my breath hitch. The silver chain is taut between us, a cold line of metal against the heat of our skin. "I don't need pickup lines," he whispers, leaning down until his lips are brushing against the shell of my ear. "I have you right where I want you. And the best part? You did this to yourself." He pulls back just enough to look me in the eye, and for the first time, I see a flicker of something in his gaze that isn't just amusement. It's hunger. Raw, unchecked, and focused entirely on me. "Now," he says, his voice dropping to a velvety growl, "let's go see the rest of your new prison." He starts walking toward the back of the penthouse, where a set of double doors stands open. My heart hammers against my ribs as I realize where he's taking me. The doors lead to a bedroom dominated by a bed so large it looks like it belongs in a myth. Richard stops at the edge of the mattress and turns to me, his expression unreadable. "We're going to be here a while, Anika. You might as well get comfortable." He sits on the edge of the bed, and the weight of him pulls me down beside him. I'm stuck. Physically, legally, and, if my traitorous body is any indication, spiritually. "I'm not sleeping here," I say, my voice a little higher than I intended. Richard just looks at me, a slow, dark smile spreading across his face. "You're cuffed to me, detective. Unless you plan on losing the arm, you don't really have a choice." Chapter 3. The King's Comfort. I've spent 10 years on the force, survived 3 riot calls, and once tackled a 200-pound shifter through a plate glass window, but sitting on the edge of Richard Walton's bed is the most dangerous thing I've ever done. The silk duvet beneath my hands feels like a trap, and the man beside me feels like the hunter who set it. "You look like you're waiting for a strike, Anika," Richard says, his voice surprisingly soft. He's discarded his suit jacket, and the white dress shirt underneath is strained across the muscles of his back. He looks even bigger without the layers, a mountain of tanned skin and hidden power. I'm an officer of the law, I remind him, though my left wrist is currently resting on his thigh because of the cuffs. I don't get comfortable with suspects. You're not an officer right now, he counters, turning to face me. You're just a woman who made a very interesting choice. And I'm just a man who is tired of being alone in this room. He reaches out with his free hand. For a second, I think he's going to grab me, and my fierce instinct kicks in. I slap his hand away, but it's like hitting a stone wall. He doesn't even flinch. Instead, he catches my hand midair, his fingers intertwining with mine. Don't, I whisper, but I don't pull away. The heat of his palm is addictive. Why? Are you afraid you might like it? He moves closer, his presence overwhelming the small space between us. You spent your whole life fighting, Anika. Fighting the pack, fighting the city, fighting yourself. Don't you want to stop for a minute? Just a minute? I look at our joined hands, my pale skin against his tanned, scarred knuckles. He has the hands of a ruler, strong, capable, and used to taking what he wants. But he isn't taking. He's waiting. I can't, I say, and for the first time I sound as tired as I feel. If I stop fighting, I lose. Not with me, Richard rumbles. He lets go of my hand, but only to reach for the collar of his shirt. He starts unbuttoning it, one-handed, with a slow, agonizing deliberation. With me, you don't lose anything. You just gain an ally. An ally who keeps me in silver chains? I gesture to the cuffs. Richard stops at the third button, his chest partially exposed. He reaches into the pocket of his discarded jacket, which is lying on the bed between us. He pulls out a small, glinting object. The key. My heart stops. I lunged for it, but he's faster. He raises his hand, holding the key just out of my reach. You want it? He asks, his eyes darkening. Give it to me, Richard. This has gone far enough. I'll give it to you on one condition. He leans in, his face inches from mine. I can see the golden flecks in his brown eyes, the raw intensity of his wolf simmering just below the surface. Admit that you didn't come here tonight just to arrest me. Admit that you wanted to see if the stories were true. What stories? I breathe, the air leaving my lungs. The stories about what happens when a wolf finds his mate. The word mate hits me like a physical blow. We don't use that word in the department. We call it biological synchronization or predatory bonding. But mate sounds like forever. It sounds like a surrender I'm not ready for. I don't believe in fairy tales, I say, my voice trembling slightly. Good, because this isn't a fairy tale. Richard reaches out and tucks a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His touch is light, almost hesitant, but it feels like a brand. This is chemistry. This is biology. This is the reason you couldn't stay away from my territory, Anika. You didn't come here to break me. You came here to find the only thing that could hold you. He drops the key back into his pocket. Hey, you said... I said I'd give it to you if you admitted it. You didn't admit it. He stands up, pulling me with him. And until you do, the key stays with me. He walks toward a small bar set up in the corner of the room, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. He hands one to me, the silver chain clinking against the glass. Drink. You're shaking. I'm not shaking. I lie, taking a gulp of the scotch. It burns all the way down, but it does nothing to extinguish the fire Richard has started in my veins. I look at him over the rim of the glass. He's standing there, half unbuttoned, powerful and composed. And I realize with a sinking feeling that he isn't just my suspect. He's the most captivating man I've ever met, and I'm literally tied to him. "What happens now?" I ask, my voice steadier now. Richard sets his glass down and turns to me, his expression softening into something almost tender. "Now," he says, stepping into my space until I'm backed against the bar, "we see who breaks first." He leans down, and for a second, I think he's going to kiss me. I want him to. I want to know if his lips are as commanding as his voice. But at the last second, he turns his head and presses a lingering kiss to the pulse point on my neck. "Sleep, Anika," he whispers against my skin. "The real trial starts tomorrow." He leads me back to the bed, and this time I don't resist. I lie down on one side, and he lies on the other, the silver chain draped across the space between us. It's the longest night of my life, and the most terrifying part isn't the handcuffs, it's the fact that I don't want to take them off. Chapter 4. The Midnight Negotiation. 3 a.m. is the hour of truth. In the dark, the city lights below us look like a ghost map, and the only sound in the penthouse is the steady, rhythmic breathing of the man sleeping 3 feet away from me. Richard is a quiet sleeper. No snoring, no tossing. He lies there like a sleeping predator, his chest rising and falling with a slow, heavy precision. I, on the other hand, am a nervous wreck. Every time I move, the silver cuffs rattle. A reminder that I'm essentially a human tetherball. I try to slide out of bed, hoping to maybe reach for his pants and find the key while he's under, but the moment the chain goes taut, his hand shoots out. He doesn't grab me hard, but his fingers lock around my wrist with the speed of a trap. "Going somewhere, detective?" His voice is a low, sleep-roughened growl. "The bathroom." I lie, my heart hammering. "Unless you have a warrant to stop that, too." He opens one eye, the dark iris catching the faint light from the window. He looks devastatingly handsome, with his hair mussed and his shirt open. "I'll go with you." "No, you absolutely will not." "Tethered, remember?" He sits up, rubbing a hand over his face. The muscles in his torso ripple, and I have to look away before I start drooling. "I'm not letting you out of my sight, Anika. Especially not when you're looking at me like I'm a puzzle you're trying to solve." "I'm not trying to solve you," I say, sitting up and pulling my knees to my chest. "I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to explain this to my captain." "Tell him the truth," Richard says, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. He pulls me toward him until I'm sitting between his knees. It's a position of extreme vulnerability, but he isn't being aggressive. He's just there. "Tell him you found someone you couldn't dominate." "I don't dominate people, Richard. I enforce the law." "The law is a human invention," he says, his voice dropping to that hypnotic, wolfish register. He reaches out and traces the line of my collarbone with his thumb. "My world is governed by something older. Scent, strength, Loyalty. And right now, every one of my instincts is telling me that you belong here." "I don't belong to anyone," I snap, but it lacks my usual fire. The heat of him is starting to melt my defenses. "You belong to yourself," he corrects, his thumb moving up to tilt my chin toward him. "But you could be more. You could be a queen, Anika. Someone who doesn't have to fight every battle alone." He leans in, and this time there's no turning away. His lips are warm, firm, and taste like the scotch we drank earlier. It's not a gentle kiss, it's a claim. It's the sound of a door locking behind me. I should pull away. I should slap him. Instead, I find myself leaning into him, my free hand tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. The kiss is deep, primal, and entirely too short. Richard pulls back, his breathing ragged, his eyes searching mine for any sign of regret. I'm too dazed to give him one. Why me? I whisper. You're an alpha king. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone, he says, his voice thick with emotion. I want the woman who had the courage to walk into my den alone. I want the woman who looks at me with fire instead of fear. I want you, Anika. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out the key again. He holds it out to me in the palm of his hand. Take it, he says. Unlock yourself. The door is right there. You can walk out, and I won't stop you. I look at the key. It's right there. My freedom, my career, my life. Then I look at Richard, standing there half naked and offering me the choice he never gave me earlier. If I stay, I start. If you stay, he says, his voice a low promise, I'll show you why a king needs a queen. I reach for the key, my fingers trembling. I look at the silver cuff around my wrist, then back at him. In one swift motion, I take the key and I throw it across the room. It disappears into the shadows of the plush rug. I'm not finished with my investigation yet, I say. My voice regained its fierce edge. Richard's eyes widen for a split second, before a dark, triumphant grin spreads across his face. He doesn't say a word. He just lunges, pinning me back against the pillows. Good, he growls against my throat, because I'm just getting started. The heavy silence of the room is broken by a sudden, sharp knock on the bedroom door. Alpha! A muffled voice calls out from the other side. We have a problem. The council is here. They heard about the detective. Richard freezes, his eyes snapping to the door. I feel the tension return to his body in an instant. The romantic bubble hasn't just burst. It's been shattered. They can wait, Richard snarls. They won't, Alpha. The voice responds. They're coming in. I look at Richard, then at the door, then at the cuffs that still bind us together. If the council sees me here, cuffed to their king, everything changes. Richard, I whisper, the stakes suddenly shifting. But before he can respond, the door handles start to turn. Chapter 5. The Royal Audience. The door handles aren't just turning, they're groaning under the pressure of someone who doesn't understand the concept of a private life. I look at the silver chain connecting my wrist to Richard's, then at the shadow of the key I just threw across the room. My tactical brain is screaming, Error 404, escape not found. Richard, I hiss, scrambling to pull my rumpled shirt together. The key. We need to find the... No. Richard stands, pulling me up with him as if I weigh no more than a tactical vest. He doesn't look panicked. He doesn't even look annoyed. He looks like a man who just found a reason to be even more dominant. We don't hide, Anika. That's for humans who fear the dark. My people need to see exactly who's sitting at my side. I'm cuffed to you, I whisper yell. I'm an officer of the law, not your +1 to the invasion of privacy gala. The doors swing open. 3 men and 2 women stride in. They aren't wearing suits. They're wearing heavy knits and leather, smelling of wood smoke and old stone. The council. They stop dead in their tracks, their eyes tracking from Richard's bare, scarred chest to the silver glinting between our wrists. Alpha, the eldest man says, his voice like grinding gravel. There were reports of a breach, a human detective. The report was accurate, Garrow. Richard rumbles, his voice dropping into that terrifyingly low frequency that makes the glass on the nightstand vibrate. He doesn't move to cover himself. He stands tall, his free hand settling firmly on the small of my back, pulling me flush against his side. "Meet Detective Anika Gray. She came to arrest me." One of the women, a sharp-eyed blonde with a scar running through her eyebrows, scoffs. "She cuffed herself to you? Is this a joke, Richard?" "The only joke here is the idea that you can enter my bedroom without an invitation," Richard says, and the air in the room suddenly feels 10 degrees colder. There's no magic, no glowing eyes, just the sheer, suffocating pressure of an alpha king asserting his territory. "The detective stays. She is under my protection. Any challenge to her is a challenge to me." I should speak. I should cite the legal code. I should probably tell them that I'm actually the one in charge here. But as Richard's hand splayed across my back, the heat of his palm seeping through my shirt, I find my voice has gone on a permanent vacation. Garrow steps forward, his nostrils flaring as he catches my scent. "She smells like resolve. And you, Richard, she smells like you." "She is mine," Richard says. The words aren't a romantic whisper, they're a territorial roar. He doesn't look at me when he says it, his focus entirely on the council. He is a king defending his queen, even if the queen currently has a warrant in her back pocket. "The pack won't accept a human enforcer in the high den," the blonde woman warns. "The pack will accept what I decree," Richard counters. He takes a step toward them, and because we're tethered, I'm forced to move with him. It looks like a coordinated power walk, but inside, I'm wondering if I can still claim I'm undercover if this ends up on the news. "Now leave. We have matters to discuss that don't involve your council." The council members exchange glances. They aren't happy, but Richard's authority is like a physical wall. They back out, Garrow lingering for a second longer, his eyes locked on the handcuffs. "Choose wisely, Alpha," he mutters before closing the doors. The silence that follows is heavy. I finally find my breath and shove Richard's chest. "She is mine? Really? I've had more subtle interrogations from a rookie with a flashlight." "I said what needed to be said," Richard says, his voice returning to that velvety smoothness. "They needed to know you weren't a prisoner. You're a partner." "I'm a detective," I remind him. "And right now, I'm a detective who is technically missing. My captain is going to lose his mind." "Let him," Richard says. He walks back toward the window, pulling me with him. The rain has stopped, leaving the city below slick and gleaming. "The council is right about one thing, though. You do smell like me." He turns me around so my back is to the window, trapping me between the cold glass and his heated body. "This isn't a game anymore, Anika," he whispers, his face inches from mine. "You threw the key. You chose this. Now you're going to see what it really means to be cuffed to a king." He leans down, his lips grazing my jawline, and I feel a shiver of pure, unadulterated anticipation. But before his lips can meet mine, a low, rhythmic thumping starts from somewhere beneath the floorboards, a vibration that feels like 1,000 hearts beating in unison. "The gathering," Richard murmurs, his eyes darkening. "They're calling for us." Chapter 6. Tactical Stripping. The gathering? That sounds like a heavy metal festival I'm not dressed for, I say, trying to mask my nerves with a healthy dose of sarcasm. The vibration from below is getting stronger, a primal pulse that makes the silver cuff around my wrist feel like it's humming. "It's the pack's way of demanding a presence," Richard explains, already moving toward a walk-in closet that's roughly the size of my entire apartment. "They've heard the rumors. They want to see the woman who walked into the Alpha's den and didn't come out." "I'm still in tactical gear, Richard. I look like I'm here to serve a summons, not a royal decree." I look down at my scuffed boots and cargo pants. I look like a detective. He looks like a god who just woke up. Then we'll have to change that, he says, stopping in front of a row of shirts that probably cost more than my car. He turns to me, his gaze scanning my body with a clinical, yet burning intensity. But first, we have to get you out of that armor. He doesn't wait for permission. He reaches for the heavy buckles of my tactical vest. Because my left hand is cuffed to his right, his movements are restricted, forcing him to lean in close. Too close. I can smell the adrenaline on him, the scent of the wolf sharpening. I can do it myself, I protest, my fingers fumbling with the clips. You have one hand, Anika. I have the other. He brushes my hands away, his fingers steady as he clicks the first buckle open. His knuckles graze my chest, and I forget how to use my lungs. Hold still, unless you want me to just rip it off. Is that an Alpha King threat or a promise? I bite back, though my heart is trying to leap out of my throat. He ignores the quip, focusing on the second buckle. The vest drops to the floor with a heavy thud, leaving me in just my black tank top. The air in the closet suddenly feels very thin. Richard doesn't step back. He lingers, his eyes tracking the line of my throat. You're a warrior, he murmurs, his voice a low vibration. I can see it in the way you carry yourself. But even warriors need to take off the shield sometimes. The shield is what keeps me alive, Richard. No, he says, stepping even closer, until I'm backed against a rack of silk suits. I'm what keeps you alive now. He reaches for the button of my cargo pants, and I finally find my voice. Whoa, King, slow down. I thought this was tactical stripping, not alpha gone wild. Richard pauses, a flash of genuine amusement crossing his face. I was going to suggest you change into something more appropriate for the council. There's a dress in the back. My sister left it here months ago. It should fit. I don't do dresses, I snap. You'll do this one, he says, his tone shifting back to that immovable command. Unless you want to meet the pack in your underwear. I wouldn't mind, but they might find it a bit distracting. He leads me to the back of the closet and pulls out a garment bag. Inside is a dress of dark forest green silk. It's simple, elegant, and looks like it was woven from moonlight and shadows. I'm not wearing that, I lie, even as my fingers reach out to touch the fabric. It's the softest thing I've ever felt. Wear it for me, Richard says, and the way he says it, not as a command, but as a request, is my undoing. The process of getting into the dress while cuffed is a comedy of errors and high-stakes tension. He has to hold the fabric while I slip into it. I have to lean against him for balance. Every brush of his skin against mine feels like an electric shock. By the time the silk is settled over my curves, we're both breathing hard, the closet feeling like a pressure cooker. Turn around, he says, his voice thick. I turn, and he reaches for the zipper at the back. His fingers are warm against my spine, moving slowly, agonizingly as he pulls the silk closed. He doesn't let go once it's done. He rests his forehead against the back of my neck, his breath hot on my skin. Anika, he whispers. Yeah? Don't let them see you blink. You're the wolf breaker. Show them why. He pulls back, and I turn to face the mirror. I don't recognize the woman looking back. The fierce detective is still there, but she's wrapped in elegance, her eyes bright with a fire that has nothing to do with the law. And beside her stands the king, his hand still joined to hers by the silver chain. Ready? He asks. No, I say, straightening my shoulders. Let's go. Chapter 7. The Primal Descent. The elevator takes us down, but this time it doesn't stop at the lobby. It goes deeper, into the bedrock of the mountain the estate is built upon. As the doors open, I'm hit by a wall of sound, the chanting of hundreds of voices, and a scent so thick it's like walking into a solid object. It's the smell of the wild, raw, unrefined, and overwhelmingly powerful. We step out onto a stone ledge overlooking a massive natural cavern. Below us, hundreds of shifters are gathered around a central fire. There are no magical lights, just the flickering orange glow of the flames dancing off the damp stone walls. "This is the heart of the pack," Richard says, his voice carrying over the din without him even raising it. The moment we appear, the chanting stops. A silence so profound it's deafening falls over the cavern. Hundreds of pairs of eyes turn upward, fixed on us, on the king and the woman in green silk cuffed to his arm. "They're waiting for a sign," I whisper, my hand tightening on Richard's. "Then let's give them one," he says. He leads me down a winding stone staircase. Every step feels like a descent into a different world. The alpha energy in the air is palpable, a physical weight that makes my skin prickle. I don't feel like a detective anymore. I feel like a part of something ancient. We reach the floor of the cavern, the crowd parting for Richard like the Red Sea. He doesn't look at them. He keeps his eyes forward, his stride confident and heavy. We reach the central fire, the heat of it lashing at my face. Garrow, the elder from the bedroom, stands by the flames. He looks at me, then at the silver cuffs, his expression grim. "Alpha," he says, his voice echoing. "You bring a human to the heart. You bring the law to the pack." "I bring an equal," Richard bellows, and the sound is so powerful I can feel it in my chest. He lifts our joined hands, the silver chain glinting in the firelight. "The silver doesn't bind her to me. It binds us to a new future. She is Anika Gray, and she is your queen." A low growl ripples through the crowd. It's not a growl of anger, but of acknowledgement, a primal acceptance that vibrates through the very floor beneath my feet. "She must prove her fire," the blonde woman from the council calls out from the shadows. "She already has," Richard says, turning to me. He reaches out with his free hand and cups my cheek, his thumb tracing my lower lip. "Show them, Anika. Show them you aren't afraid of the wolf." I look at the sea of faces, then back at Richard. My fierce nature isn't a badge or a gun. It's the fact that I'm standing here, cuffed to a monster, and I've never felt more alive. I step forward, pulling Richard with me. I look Garrow dead in the eye. "I didn't come here to change your laws," I say, my voice steady and clear. "I came to enforce one, the law of the mate. And if any of you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me, after I've finished my investigation." A few of the younger wolves let out a short, sharp bark, the shifter equivalent of a laugh. The tension breaks, replaced by a heavy, expectant energy. Richard leans in, his scent overwhelming me. "Well done, detective," he whispers. But the moment of triumph is short-lived. The air in the cavern suddenly shifts. The smell of cedar and rain is replaced by something acrid, the scent of something cold and wrong. Richard's posture changes instantly, his muscles locking into a state of total combat readiness. "Richard?" I ask, feeling the shift in the chain. "Stay behind me," he snarls, his voice sounding more like a wolf than a man. From the dark tunnels at the back of the cavern, a group of figures emerges. They aren't pack. They're dressed in modern tactical gear, similar to mine, but their faces are hidden behind black masks. They don't have guns, but they carry heavy iron poles. The extinction unit. Garrow whispers, his face turning pale. They aren't here for a territorial dispute. They're here for the king. And because I'm cuffed to him, they're here for me, too. The lead figure steps forward, a heavy iron collar in his hand. Richard Walton, by order of the High Magistrate, you are being taken into permanent custody. And the detective—
She's coming with us for questioning.
I look at Richard. He isn't looking at them. He's looking at the silver cuff on his wrist, then at me. Anika, he growls. The key. Tell me you still have the key. I look at the dark shadows of the cavern, remembering the sound of the key hitting the rug miles above us. I threw it, Richard. I whisper, I threw it across the room. The masked men lunged. 8. The weight of the crown. The air in the cavern doesn't just feel cold anymore, it feels sharp. The extinction unit doesn't carry guns. Guns are for people who want to keep their distance. These men carry iron poles designed to pin a shifter to the ground, neutralizing muscle with leverage and cold, hard weight. And because I'm currently attached to the primary target,
I'm essentially the dead weight that's going to get us both captured. Richard, we can't fight them like this.
I hiss, my voice lost in the sudden, deafening roar of the pack. The wolves are surging forward, but the masked men move with a chilling, synchronized efficiency. They aren't here to fight the pack. They're here to extract the king. We aren't fighting, Anika. Richard rumbles, his voice vibrating through the hand locked in mine. We're leaving. He doesn't wait for my tactical assessment. He moves. If I thought Richard was fast in his office, I was wrong. In the cavern, under the pressure of a threat, he is a blur of charcoal suit and raw, rhythmic power. He doesn't pull me. He sweeps me into his side, his free arm locking around my waist so tightly I can feel every corded muscle in his torso. We move as one, a four-legged beast of green silk and brute strength. He uses the momentum of the lunging men against them, spinning us in a circle that sends two of them crashing into the stone altar. There's no magic, no glowing eyes, just the sickening thud of a 300-pound man moving with the grace of a hurricane. Keep your head down, he snarls into my hair. We reach the mouth of a side tunnel, a dark, jagged rip in the stone. Richard doesn't hesitate. He plunges into the dark, pulling me into a space so narrow our shoulders rub against the damp walls. The sound of the cavern, the shouting, the growling, the clatter of iron, fades into a dull roar, replaced by the frantic sound of my own breathing. Stop, I gasp, my heels catching on the uneven floor. Richard, stop! They're behind us. He stops, but he doesn't let go. He spins me around, pinning me against the cold, wet stone of the tunnel. He's breathing hard, his chest heaving against mine. In the near total darkness, his eyes are the only things I can see. Dark, focused, and utterly predatory. They won't follow us here, he whispers, his voice echoing off the stone. These tunnels are older than the city. They're built for the pack, not for humans in tactical gear. I'm a human in tactical gear, I remind him, though the green silk dress is currently plastered to my skin. And I'm the one who threw the key, remember? If we get stuck in here, we're stuck together forever. Richard leans in, his heat acting like a lighthouse in the damp chill of the cave. He rests his forehead against mine, the silver chain between our wrists hanging like a heavy curtain. Is that a threat, detective? Or a promise? It's a logistical nightmare, I snap, but my heart isn't in it. The adrenaline is fading, replaced by that heavy, magnetic pull that seems to govern every atom in this man's vicinity. Why didn't you let them take you? You could have fought the charges. You have lawyers. I don't answer to their laws, Richard growls, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw in the dark. And I don't let anyone take what is mine. They didn't just come for the king, Anika. They came for the woman I cuffed to my side. That was their first mistake. Their last was thinking I'd let them touch you. I can handle myself, I whisper, though the way he says mine is doing things to my composure that no tactical training could ever prepare me for. I know you can, he says, his voice softening. That's why I want you, not because you're weak.
But because you're the only thing in this world strong enough to stand next to me without breaking. He leans down, his lips grazing mine in a ghost of a kiss that makes my knees buckle. He catches me, his arm tightening around my waist, and for a moment, the tunnels, the extinction unit, and the warrant are all gone. There's just the heat, the stone, and the man who refused to let me go. We need to keep moving. I breathe against his lips. We will, he says, pulling back just enough to look me in the eye. But first, I need to know one thing. What? When we get to the end of this tunnel, are you going to run, or are you going to stay? The question hangs in the air, heavier than the silver between us. But before I can answer, a low, melodic whistling starts to echo from deeper within the cave. A sound that is definitely not a wolf. Chapter 9. The Gilded Cage. The whistling is rhythmic, a cheerful tune that feels entirely out of place in a damp tunnel filled with fleeing alphas and cuffed detectives. Richard stiffens, his hand dropping from my jaw to grip my shackled wrist. He doesn't look afraid. He looks annoyed. "Who is that?" I whisper, my hand instinctively reaching for a belt that no longer holds a weapon. "An old friend," Richard mutters, "and the only person in this mountain who doesn't care about royal protocol." We round a corner, and the tunnel opens into a space that looks less like a cave and more like a high-end wine cellar. Racks of dusty bottles line the walls, and in the center of the room, sitting on a velvet armchair that has no business being underground, is a man in a pristine white lab coat. He's polishing a pair of spectacles, still whistling that same upbeat tune. "Richard," the man says without looking up, "you're late for your tasting. And I see you brought a guest. A very attached guest." "Julian," Richard says, his voice tight. "We need a way out. The back exit to the ridge." Julian finally puts on his glasses and looks at us. He's older, with silver hair and eyes that look like they've seen everything twice. His gaze travels from Richard's bare chest to my green silk dress, and finally to the silver handcuffs. He lets out a low, appreciative whistle. "Tactical silver. Grade A. You always did have expensive taste in jewelry, Richard." "Can you open them?" I ask, stepping forward and dragging Richard with me. Julian stands up, walking over to examine the cuffs. He doesn't touch them. He just hums. "I could. But why would I? You two look so synchronized. It's a masterpiece of biological tension." "Julian," Richard warns, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Fine. The ridge exit is through the cellar door, but I'm afraid the permanent custody squad is already patrolling the upper trails. You'll have to stay here until the heat dies down." Julian gestures to a small hidden door behind a rack of 1945 Bordeaux. "There's a suite back there, fully stocked, soundproof." Richard looks at me. I look at the door. It's another cage, just a prettier one. But with the extinction unit crawling over the mountain, it's the only option we have. "Fine," Richard says. Julian smiles, a small knowing thing. "Try not to break the furniture. It's antique." The suite behind the cellar door is a masterpiece of dark velvet, low lighting, and heavy, scent-drenched air. It's a bunker designed for a king's recreation. There are no windows, just the soft hum of an air filtration system and the overwhelming presence of Richard Walton. The door clicks shut behind us, and the silence is immediate. It's just us. Again. "You're very quiet, Anika," Richard says, walking toward a low-slung velvet sofa. He sits, and the chain pulls me down beside him. We're so close our thighs are pressed together, the silk of my dress sliding against the fabric of his trousers. "I'm thinking about my life choices," I say, leaning my head back against the velvet. A year ago, I was winning the Marksmanship Award. Now I'm hiding in a wine cellar with a man who thinks he owns me. "I don't think I own you," Richard says, his voice low and incredibly close to my ear. He reaches out, his free hand tracing the line of my collarbone. "I think I'm the only person who actually sees you. The rest of the world sees the badge. I see the woman who threw away the key because she wanted to see what would happen next. I threw the key to make a point," I lie, though my heart is hammered against my ribs. "What point was that?" He leans in, his scent, now mixed with the dusty, sweet aroma of the wine cellar, filling my senses. "That you're just as reckless as I am? That you want this just as much as I do?" He doesn't wait for an answer. He leans down and kisses the hollow of my throat. It's a slow, deliberate movement that makes my breath hitch. I should push him away. I should remind him that I'm still a detective. But as his lips move against my skin, I realize I don't want to be a detective right now. I just want to be hers. I turn my head, my lips finding his. It's a collision of hunger and desperation. The silver chain rattles between us, a rhythmic, metallic percussion to the sound of our breathing. He pulls me into his lap, the dress bunching around my hips, his hands finding the skin of my waist. "Anika," he growls against my mouth. "Don't talk," I whisper. "Just don't talk." But just as he moves to lay me back against the velvet, the soft hum of the air filtration system cuts out. The lights flicker and die, plunging the suite into total, absolute darkness. And from the other side of the cellar door, I hear the heavy, metallic thud of a bolt being slid into place. We aren't just hiding anymore. We're locked in. The darkest hour. The darkness in the suite is so thick it feels like a physical weight. Richard is still over me, his body a solid, warm anchor in the void. I can feel his heartbeat, steady, powerful, and slightly accelerated against my own. "Julian?" I call out, my voice sounding small in the velvet-lined room. No answer, only the sound of our breathing. "He wouldn't lock us in," Richard says, his voice a low vibration in the dark. He shifts, and I feel him reaching for something on the side table. A click, but no light. "The power's been cut from the outside. Julian didn't do this." "Then who did?" "The council," Richard growls, "or Garrow. They've decided that if the king won't listen to reason, he'll have to listen to the silence." "They're trapping us here to force a decision?" I ask, my hand finding his in the dark. The silver cuff is cold, a stark contrast to the heat of his skin. "They're trapping us here to see if we break," Richard says. "They think that without the lights, without the distractions, you'll realize what you've done. They think I'll realize that a human is a liability." He moves, his weight shifting as he sits back up, pulling me with him until I'm tucked into the crook of his arm. Even in the dark, I can feel the intensity of his focus. He isn't worried about the door. He's worried about me. Are you afraid, Anika? Of the dark? No. Of the council? Maybe a little. I lean my head against his shoulder, the silk of my dress cool against his skin. But mostly, I'm just annoyed that I'm stuck in a room with a man who still hasn't told me his middle name. Richard lets out a short, dry laugh. It's Richard. Richard Walton. Are you satisfied, detective? It'll do for now. We sit in silence for a long time. In the dark, my other senses sharpen. I can smell the cedar and the wine, but also the metallic tang of the silver and the salt of my own skin. I can feel the texture of his shirt, the slight roughness of his calloused hands, and the way his body seems to pulse with a hidden energy. Why me, Richard? I ask, the question finally bubbling to the surface. Truly, you've had decades to find a queen. Why the woman who tried to put you in a cage? Because you were the only one who didn't look at me and see a king, he says, his voice a low, intimate murmur. Everyone else looks at me and sees a title, a threat, or a bank account. You looked at me and saw a man who needed to be held accountable. You saw me. He reaches out, his hand finding my face in the dark. His thumb brushes my lower lip, a slow, sensory exploration. And when I looked at you, I didn't see a detective. I saw my match. I saw the fire that could finally keep me warm. He leans in, and even without sight, I know exactly where he is. Our lips meet in the dark, a slow, deep kiss that feels more honest than anything we've done in the light. Without the world watching, without the council or the pack, the silver between us doesn't feel like a chain. It feels like a bridge. The kiss deepens, becoming more urgent. His hands find the zipper of my dress, his fingers moving with a practiced ease that makes me shiver. The silk falls away, leaving me in nothing but lace and the dark. Richard, I breathe, my hands finding the muscles of his chest. I have you, he growls. I have you, Anika. The intimacy in the dark is overwhelming, a symphony of touch, scent, and sound. There is no magic here, no glowing light, just the raw, primal reality of two people finding each other in the void. Every touch is magnified, every breath a shared secret. But just as the world outside seems to vanish entirely, a new sound breaks through. Not a knock, not a whistle. It's the sound of a key turning in the lock. Slowly, the heavy cellar door creaks open. A beam of harsh, white light cuts through the darkness, blinding us. Richard is instantly on his feet, shielding me with his body, his eyes narrowed against the glare. Standing in the doorway isn't Garrow. It's not Julian. It's my captain, and he's holding a pair of bolt cutters. Detective Gray, he says, his voice cold and professional. I believe your shift is over. I look at the captain, then at Richard, who is standing there half naked and cuffed to me, his jaw set in a murderous line. The silver chain between us has never looked more like a crime scene. Captain, I say, my voice cracking. I can explain. Don't bother, the captain says, stepping into the room. The warrant's been pulled, and so has your badge. Chapter 11. The Law versus the King. If there is a rock bottom for a professional career, I've hit it. Actually, I've burrowed through it and found a secret basement. I am currently standing in a dark wine cellar, draped in a forest green silk dress that is definitely missing its zipper's cooperation, and I am cuffed to a half-naked alpha king.
And the man looking at me with equal parts disgust and pity is Captain Miller, the man who signed my commendation for excellent judgment 6 months ago. The silence in the room is so thick you could carve it with a tactical knife. Miller doesn't look at the king.
He looks at me. His eyes travel down to the silver chain, then up to the hand Richard has draped protectively over my shoulder.
"Gray," Miller says, his voice like dry sandpaper. "Tell me you're undercover. Tell me this is part of a deep tissue sting operation and you just haven't had time to check in." "Captain," I start, my voice cracking in a way that betrays every ounce of my wolf-breaker reputation. "The situation is unconventional." "Unconventional?" Miller scoffs, stepping into the room. The bolt cutters in his hand glint with a dull industrial menace. "You've been off the grid for 12 hours. The Bureau is in an uproar. We had to coordinate with the High Magistrate just to get a location on your tracker." I turned my tracker off. I mutter, "I know you did." Miller snaps. He turns his gaze to Richard, and for the first time, I see a flicker of real fear in my captain's eyes. Richard isn't just standing there. He's vibrating with a low-frequency growl that I can feel through the silver chain. He looks like a god of the underworld who just found out his favorite soul is being evicted. "Step away from the detective, Walton," Miller commands, though he stays well out of Richard's reach. "The warrant for your arrest has been suspended pending a federal inquiry, but the detective is coming with me. Now." Richard doesn't step away. If anything, he pulls me closer, his arm locking around my waist like a steel band. "She isn't going anywhere with you." "Richard," I whisper, placing a hand on his bare chest. His heart is thundering under my palm, a wild, rhythmic beat. "He's my captain. This is my job." "You don't have a job anymore, Anika," Miller interjects, his voice cold. "I've been authorized to strip you of your badge effective immediately. You crossed the line. You're not an officer. You're a liability. Now get over here so I can cut those damn things off you." He moves forward. The bolt cutter is raised. Richard reacts instantly. He doesn't lunge, but the air in the room suddenly feels like it's been pressurized. He shifts his weight, shielding me with his massive frame. "If you touch her with those," Richard growls, a sound that is more wolf than man, "I will show you exactly why the High Magistrate fears this mountain. She stays with me because she chose to stay, not because of the silver. She's a human woman under duress," Miller yells. "I am not under duress," I roar, finally finding my fire. I step out from behind Richard, the green silk swishing around my legs. The silver chain jerks taut, pulling Richard's arm with me. "Captain, put the cutters down. You want my badge? Fine. It's on the dresser in the penthouse. But you don't get to come in here and treat me like a victim. I cuffed him. I threw the key. And I'm staying until I decide I'm done." Miller looks at me like I've grown a second head, a wolf head. "You've lost your mind, Gray. You're choosing a shifter over your own kind?" "I'm choosing the man who actually respects my strength." I snap. "Now leave, before the Alpha King decides he's done being polite." Miller stares at me for a long beat, then looks at Richard. He sees the absolute certainty in the King's eyes. He knows he can't win this. Not here, not without an army. He sets the bolt cutters on a wine crate with a heavy clunk. "You're dead to the force, Anika," he says, backing toward the door. "Don't come looking for help when he decides he's bored with his new toy." The door slams shut, and the bolt slides back into place. Silence returns, but it's a different kind of silence now. The weight of my old life is gone, replaced by the crushing reality of my new one. I turn to Richard. He's looking at me with an intensity that makes the previous hour feel like a light breeze. "You stayed," he whispers. "I didn't have anywhere else to go," I say,
trying to maintain my composure, and I still have a lot of questions about your middle name. Richard doesn't laugh. He reaches out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw, where a tear I didn't know I was crying is sliding down. You're a queen now, Anika. And a queen never has to explain herself to a captain. He leans down, his lips almost touching mine. Now, where were we before we were so rudely interrupted? Chapter 12. The Unbound Choice. The cellar suite feels smaller now, or maybe it's just that Richard seems to be growing larger with every breath he takes. The departure of the captain hasn't just left a vacuum, it's left us in a state of hyper-awareness. The silver chain between us is no longer a legal instrument. It's a physical tether between two people who have just burned their bridges to the ground. You lost everything for me, Richard rumbles. He's led me back to the velvet sofa, but he doesn't sit. He stands over me, the shadows of the room playing across the hard lines of his abs and the dark hair of his chest. I lost a badge, I say, leaning back and trying to look more comfortable than I feel. I still have my pride, and apparently a very expensive green dress. You have more than that, Richard says. He reaches into the pocket of his trousers, the ones he's still wearing, thankfully, and pulls out a small, glinting object. It's the key. Not the one I threw across the room, a different one, smaller, gold. Julian has spares for everything, Richard explains, his voice low, including my recreational restraints. He takes my left hand, the one in the silver cuff, and holds it gently. He doesn't unlock it immediately. He just looks at it, his thumb stroking the sensitive skin of my inner wrist. The captain wanted to cut you free, Richard says, but I want you to do it. I want you to know that from this moment on, if you're by my side, it's because you want to be, not because I'm holding you. He presses the key into my free hand. His skin is like a furnace, and the contact sends a jolt of pure electricity up my arm. I look at the key, then at the cuff. This is it, the end of the arrest, the end of the tether. I slide the key into the lock. It turns with a smooth, silent precision. Click. The silver cuff falls open. I pull my hand away, the sudden weightlessness of my arm feeling strange, almost wrong. Richard doesn't move his arm. He lets his end of the cuff stay locked, the chain dangling against his thigh. There, I say, my voice a whisper. I'm free. Are you? Richard asks. He stands up and walks toward the back of the suite, where a large ornate rug covers most of the stone floor. He reaches down and tugs at a hidden ring in the floorboards. A trap door opens, revealing a spiraling stone staircase that leads even deeper into the mountain. This leads to the high ridge, he says. It's the highest point on my land. From there you can see 3 states, and you can see the path that leads back to the city. He offers me his hand. Not the cuffed one, the other. Come with me, Anika. One last walk as a detective, or the first walk as something else. I take his hand. We climb the stairs in silence, the air getting cooler and fresher as we ascend. Finally, we emerge through a heavy iron grate onto a narrow stone ledge. The view is staggering. The storm has cleared completely, leaving the sky a deep, bruised purple, filled with more stars than I've ever seen. Below us, the city is a distant, shimmering grid of amber lights. It looks small, insignificant. Richard walks to the edge of the ridge, his hair blowing in the wind. He looks like a part of the mountain itself, rugged, unyielding, and timeless. That's your world, Anika, he says, gesturing toward the city. Rules, badges, captains who don't understand that some things can't be governed by a warrant. He turns to face me, the wind whipping the green silk of my dress around my legs. And this is my world, raw, honest, and currently missing its heart. He reaches for the cuff still on his own wrist. He doesn't use the key. He simply grips the silver in his bare hand and, with a low growl of effort, wrenches the metal apart. The silver snaps like a twig, the pieces falling to the stone floor with a sharp, melodic ring. "The silver is gone," he says, stepping toward me until our chests are touching. "No more games, no more custody. I'm asking you, Anika Gray, not as a king,
but as a man who has finally found what he's been hunting for his entire life."
"What are you asking, Richard?"
"Stay. Rule with me, not as my subject, but as my equal. Be the fire that keeps this mountain alive." I look at the city, then at the man in front of me. I think about the badge I no longer have and the life that always felt a size too small. I reach up and tangle my fingers in his hair, pulling his head down. "I told you, Richard, I'm not finished with my investigation yet." But just as he leans in to seal the deal, a low, rhythmic howling begins to echo from the valley below. Hundreds of voices rising in a mournful, urgent crescendo.
"The challenge," Richard whispers, his eyes turning a deep, dark brown. "They're not waiting for a queen. They're coming to take the crown."
Chapter 13. The Alphas Stand. The howling isn't a song. It's a threat. It's the sound of a pack that has realized their king is distracted, and they're moving in to test the strength of his grip. Richard stands on the edge of the ridge, his body taut, his nostrils flaring as he catches the scent of the challengers rising on the wind. "I thought you said they accepted me," I say, stepping up beside him. My heart is racing, but for the first time, it's not from fear. It's from the sheer, raw adrenaline of the hunt.
"The pack accepts strength, Anika," Richard rumbles. "They saw the captain. They saw the silver. They think I've gone soft for a human. They think the king has forgotten how to bite."
"Well," I say, adjusting the silk strap of my dress, "I guess we'll have to remind them." Richard turns to me, a dark, dangerous grin spreading across his face. "We? You're cuffed to me in spirit now, Richard. Remember? And nobody takes my crown." He laughs, a deep, booming sound that echoes off the peaks. He reaches out and pulls me into him, his hands sliding down to grip my waist. He doesn't look like a man under threat. He looks like a man who has just found his favorite reason to fight. "Then let's show them what a king and queen look like," he says. He doesn't shift. He doesn't need to. He leads me back down the stairs, through the cellar, and out into the main hall of the estate. The double doors are wide open, and the entrance is filled with shifters. They aren't in tactical gear this time. They are in their rawest forms, huge, shaggy wolves with eyes that reflect the moonlight like polished glass. In the center of the hall stands Garrow. He isn't a wolf, but his presence is just as heavy. He holds a long wooden staff tipped with an iron wolf's head. "Richard Walton," Garrow calls out. "The pack demands the trial. You have brought a human into the high den without a blood bond. You have weakened the line." Richard doesn't stop. He walks down the stairs, his hand firmly in mine. He stops 3 steps from the bottom, looking down at Garrow with a calm, terrifying composure. "The line isn't weakened, Garrow," Richard says, his voice carrying through the hall like a physical force. "It's been forged. Anika Gray isn't a human in your den. She is the one who took the king into custody. She is the one who broke the silver." He lifts our joined hands. No cuffs, just fingers tightly intertwined. "If any of you want to challenge my strength, step forward. But know this. You aren't just fighting the wolf.
You're fighting the woman who isn't afraid of him. Garrow looks at me, his eyes narrowing. He steps forward, the tip of his staff clicking against the marble floor. The trial is by blood, Alpha. She must prove she can hold the bond. How? I ask, stepping forward. The scenting, Garrow says. If the pack accepts your scent as part of his, the bond is recognized. If not, you leave the mountain. Forever. He gestures to the circle of wolves. They begin to move, circling us in a slow, rhythmic dance. The air in the hall becomes thick with the scent of wet fur, ancient stone, and the sharp, metallic tang of the alpha energy. I close my eyes. I don't think about the badge. I don't think about the city. I think about the cedar and the rain. I think about the heat of Richard's skin and the way his heartbeat sounded in the dark. I let my own fierce nature rise to the surface, not the detective, but the woman who threw the key. The wolves stop circling. One by one, they lower their heads, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. The growling stops, replaced by a low, vibrating hum of acceptance. Garrow bows his head. The scent is won. The bond is recognized. The wolves begin to disperse, fading back into the shadows of the estate. The challenge is over, but the night is just beginning. Richard turns me to face him. He doesn't say a word. He just picks me up, his arms hooking under my knees, and carries me back toward the stairs. Where are we going now, King? I ask, my arms wrapping around his neck. To the penthouse. He growls, his eyes burning with a hunger that has nothing to do with the pack. I believe we have a very long night of biological synchronization ahead of us. He carries me into the penthouse and kicks the door shut. He sets me down on the black marble island in the kitchen, the same place where this all started. He stands between my legs, his hands sliding up my thighs, his face inches from mine. You're a queen, Anika, he whispers. And you're a prisoner of your own heart, Richard, I counter. He leans in to kiss me, but just as our lips meet, a sharp electronic beep echoes through the quiet room. I look down at the floor. My tactical jacket, discarded in Chapter 1, is lying in the corner, and from the pocket, a small red light is flashing. The tracker, the one I thought I turned off. It's not just sending a signal, it's receiving one. Detective Gray, a voice crackles from the tiny speaker. The extraction team is on the roof, 5 minutes out. Move to the secondary LZ. I look at Richard. He looks at the jacket. The unbound choice just got a lot more complicated. Chapter 14. The Final Extraction. The red light on my tactical jacket is blinking like a rhythmic, accusatory heartbeat. 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, a team of high-altitude specialists is going to fast rope onto this roof, expecting to find a captive detective and a target to be neutralized. They aren't coming with a warrant. They're coming with sanitization protocols. I look at the jacket, then at Richard. He hasn't moved from his spot by the marble island. He looks like a storm caught in a bottle, silent, heavy, and ready to shatter everything in his path. The alpha in him isn't a glow or a growl right now. It's a terrifyingly calm stillness. You didn't turn it off, Anika, he says. It's not a question. It's a statement of fact that hangs between us like a physical wall. I thought I did, I say, my voice sounding tight. I walk over to the jacket, the green silk of my dress rustling like dry leaves. I pick up the radio. I don't want to be extracted, Richard. I told Miller I was staying. Miller doesn't care what you want, Richard rumbles, stepping toward me. He stops just inches away, his heat cutting through the cool air of the penthouse. He sees a mistake that needs to be erased. He sees a queen he wants to turn back into a pawn. The radio crackles again. "Gray, report. LZ is hot. Give us a green or we're coming in heavy." I look at Richard. I could give the green. I could walk out of here, go through 6 months of internal affairs hearings, and eventually get my badge back. I could go back to the world of cold coffee, paperwork, and people who are afraid of the dark. Or I could destroy the last link I have to that life. "I've got this," I whisper. I don't wait for him to respond. I grab the jacket and walk out onto the balcony. The wind is howling now, whipping my hair across my face. High above, I can hear the rhythmic thrum, thrum, thrum of a stealth chopper. They're close. Don't key the mic. I don't give them a green. I walk to the edge of the glass railing and look down at the thousands of lights that make up the city I used to serve. Then, with a flick of my wrist, I toss the jacket over the side. I watch the red light tumble down, a falling star of my former life, until it vanishes into the shadows of the lower levels. The chopper's searchlight sweeps across the roof, a blinding white eye looking for a signal that isn't there. I stand my ground, my arms crossed, looking directly into the light. I'm not a victim. I'm not a captive. I'm a woman who just made a choice. The searchlight lingers on me for a long, agonizing minute. I can almost feel Miller's frustration from here. Then, the light flickers and dies. The thrumming of the blades changes pitch as the chopper veers away, retreating back toward the city. The silence that follows is absolute. I turn around to find Richard standing in the doorway. He's watched the whole thing. He looks at me with an expression I can't quite decipher. A mix of pride, hunger, and something that looks suspiciously like relief. "They're gone," I say, my voice steady. "For now," Richard says, walking toward me. He reaches out and takes my hand, his fingers tangling with mine. "You just declared war on your own kind, Anika. You know that, right?" "I didn't declare war," I say, pulling him closer. "I just resigned. There's a difference." "Is there?" He pulls me into his chest, his arms locking around me. "Because in my world, there is no middle ground. You're either with the pack or you're against it." "I'm with you, Richard Walton. Isn't that enough?" He leans down, his lips grazing my ear. "It's everything. But the council won't see it that way. They saw the chopper. They'll think you're a Trojan horse." I look up at him, my brow furrowing. "So what do we do?" "We do what alphas do," he growls, his eyes darkening. "We claim the territory, starting with this room." He picks me up, but instead of carrying me to the bed, he sets me down on the edge of the balcony railing. It's a drop of 50 stories behind me, but I don't feel a flicker of fear. With Richard's hands on my waist, I've never felt more secure. "Show me," I whisper, my hands finding the back of his neck. "Show me why I stayed." He leans in, his lips inches from mine, but just as he's about to close the gap, the penthouse lights flicker and die again. A low, grinding sound echoes from the elevator shaft. Someone didn't leave with the chopper. 15. The scent of betrayal. The darkness in the penthouse is different this time. It's not the forced isolation of the wine cellar. It's the silence of a predator in the room.
Richard doesn't move, but I feel his body shift from lover to alpha in a heartbeat. His grip on my waist tightens, a silent command to stay still. "Richard?" I whisper, the wind from the balcony chilling the sweat on my neck. "Stay behind me," he breathes, his voice barely a vibration. He lifts me off the railing and sets me on my feet, stepping between me and the darkened living room. The only light comes from the moon, casting long, jagged shadows across the black marble floors. The grinding sound from the elevator shaft stops. The doors don't open, but the ceiling hatch of the elevator car above us clicks. "Julian?" Richard calls out, his voice a low, warning rumble. No answer. Instead, a soft metallic clink hits the floor. It's not a grenade. It's not a weapon. It's a pair of silver handcuffs. My handcuffs, the ones I used in Chapter 1. A figure emerges from the shadows of the kitchen. It's not a masked man or a tactical team. It's Garrow. He's holding a tablet, the screen glowing with a dull blue light that reveals the deep lines of his face. "The chopper was a distraction, Alpha," Garrow says, his voice devoid of its usual reverence. "A test of your loyalty, and you failed." "I don't answer to tests, Garrow," Richard snarls, taking a step forward. "And I certainly don't answer to you." "You answer to the pack," Garrow counters. He taps the tablet, and a series of photos appear. They're grainy, thermal images of Richard and me in the wine cellar. The kiss, the intimacy, the surrender. "The council has seen these. They see a king who has been compromised by a human agent. They see a mate bond that isn't a bond at all, but a seduction." "I am the king!" Richard bellows, and the force of his voice actually makes the crystal glasses on the bar rattle. "The bond is mine to declare. The pack must believe in the king to follow him," Garrow says. He steps into the moonlight, and I see he's carrying the iron staff from the gathering. "They see a woman who was sent to arrest you, who is now ruling you. They want a trial of truth, Richard, not of blood, but of the scent." "We did the scenting in the cavern," I interject, stepping out from behind Richard. "They accepted me." "They accepted a performance," Garrow says, his eyes fixing on mine. "Now they want the reality. If you are truly his mate, your scent will be indistinguishable from his. But if you are still the wolf breaker, the mountain will know, and it will reject you." He raises the staff and strikes the floor. The sound echoes through the penthouse like a gunshot. From the hallway, 4 other council members emerge. They don't look like they're here for a chat. They look like they're here for an execution of the spirit. "The scenting of the private den," the blonde woman says, her voice cold. "Now, or we strip the title before the sun rises." Richard turns to me. His expression is a mask of fury, but deep in his eyes I see a flicker of concern. The scenting isn't a magical spell, it's a biological immersion. It requires a level of intimacy that we've only just begun to explore. "Anika," he whispers, "you don't have to do this. We can fight our way out." "No," I say, my voice regained its fierce edge. I look at Garrow, then back at Richard. "I'm tired of running. Let them smell the truth. I'm not a detective anymore, Richard. I'm yours. Let's make sure they never forget it." Richard's jaw sets. He turns back to the council, his arm hooking around my waist and pulling me flush against him. "Fine. You want the truth? You'll get it.
But leave this room. The scenting is for the mates alone. You wait in the hall. When the door opens, you'll have your answer."
Garrow hesitates, then nods. The council retreats into the hallway, the heavy oak doors clicking shut behind them. We are alone. Truly alone. Richard doesn't waste a second. He turns me around, pinning me against the closed doors. He doesn't kiss me. He buries his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply, his breath hot and ragged against my skin.
"They want to smell me on you,"
he growls, his hands finding the silk of my dress.
"They want to know that there isn't a single inch of your soul that doesn't belong to the king."
"Then show them." I breathe, my hands tangling in his hair. He pulls back just enough to look me in the eye. And for the first time, I see the wolf fully surfaced. Not as a monster, but as a partner.
"This is going to change you, Anika," he warns. "Once the scent takes hold, you won't be able to go back, even if you wanted to."
"I'm counting on it," I say. He leans in, but just as the scenting begins in earnest, a low rhythmic scratching starts from the other side of the door. Not a hand, a claw. 16's mark. The scratching on the door is a reminder that our private den is currently under siege by tradition. But Richard doesn't let it distract him. He is focused entirely on me, on the process of biological immersion that will either cement my place at his side or cast me out of the mountain forever.
"Ignore them,"
he rumbles, his voice a low vibration that echoes in my chest. "They are the past. You are the future." He reaches for the green silk dress. He doesn't rip it. He isn't a brute, but his movements are efficient and heavy with intent. The fabric falls to the floor, leaving me in nothing but the lace I was wearing in the wine cellar. The air in the penthouse is cool, but where Richard touches me, I feel like I'm standing in front of a forge.
"The scenting isn't just about touch, Anika,"
he says, his hand sliding up my rib cage to cradle my face.
"It's about surrender. You have to let the wolfbreaker die. You have to let the law go."
"I already did," I whisper, my eyes fixed on his. "I threw the key, Richard. I threw the jacket. I'm here."
"Then feel me,"
he growls. He leans down and presses his forehead against mine. We stay like that for a long time, just breathing the same air. I can smell him. The cedar, the rain, the heavy musk of the alpha. It starts to fill my lungs, to settle in my skin. It's not magic, it's a sensory overload that slowly begins to rewrite my own biological signature. I reach out and touch his chest, my fingers tracing the scars there. He doesn't move. He lets me explore him, lets me claim his strength as mine. I find myself leaning into him, my scent mixing with his until I can't tell where I end and he begins.
"You're doing it,"
he murmurs, his lips brushing mine.
"The mountain is starting to recognize you."
The physical intimacy that follows is a slow, rhythmic dance of dominance and devotion. Richard doesn't kneel, but he worships every inch of me with a fierce, possessive focus. He marks me, not with teeth, but with the sheer weight of his presence. By the time he lays me back against the black marble island, I feel like I've been forged in his image. The scratching on the door has stopped, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. They're waiting. "Are you ready?" Richard asks, his voice thick with emotion. "I've never been readier," I say, reaching for his hand. He pulls me up, helping me back into the green silk dress. It's rumpled and the zipper is still a struggle, but it doesn't matter. The woman wearing it isn't the same one who walked in here with a warrant. Richard straightens his own shirt, his jaw set in a line of absolute authority. He takes my hand, his fingers locking with mine, and walks toward the doors. "Remember," he whispers as he reaches for the handles, "you are the queen. They don't judge you. You judge them."
He throws the doors open. Garrow and the council are standing there, their faces illuminated by the hall lights. They don't say a word. They just stand there, sniffing the air. I step forward, my head held high, my gaze steady. I don't look for their approval. I look through them. The council members exchange glances. The blonde woman's eyes widen. Garrow's nostrils flare. He takes a step back, his staff lowering until the tip touches the floor in a gesture of recognition.
"The scent is one," Garrow says, his voice hushed. "The bond is absolute."
One by one, the council members bow their heads. It's not the submission of the cavern, it's the respect of the pack for its new alpha female. Richard steps out into the hall, his hand still in mine.
"The trial is over. The queen has spoken. Now leave my mountain. We have a kingdom to run."
The council retreats, their shadows lengthening as they move toward the elevators. Richard turns to me, a triumphant grin on his face.
"You did it, Anika. You're officially the most dangerous woman in the 3 states.
I'm just a detective who finished her investigation, I say, pulling him into a kiss that tastes like victory. We walk back into the penthouse, the doors clicking shut behind us. We're finally, truly alone. The warrant is gone, the badge is gone, and the council is silenced. I walk over to the window and look out at the city. It looks different now. It's no longer a place of laws and limits. It's a place of possibilities. What now, Richard? I ask, leaning my head against the glass. Now, he says, walking up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. We see how far the expansion actually goes. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small leather-bound book. He sets it on the marble island. What's that? The real reason the High Magistrate wanted me arrested, Richard says, his voice turning serious. It's not about territory, Anika. It's about the ledger. The list of every shifter in the city who is currently working for the government. I look at the book, then at Richard. My old life is calling to me from that leather cover, but the man holding me is the only truth I need. Do you want to open it? He asks. I look at the book. Then I look at the city. Then I look at the man who cuffed me to him. Not tonight, I say, turning in his arms. Tonight I'm busy. But just as I reach for him, the elevator dings. Not the freight elevator, the private one. And as the doors open, a woman steps out. She's tall, blonde, and wearing a sharp business suit that looks exactly like the one I was wearing when I arrived. Richard, she says, her voice like ice. I believe you have something of mine. I look at Richard. He looks at the woman. And for the first time, I see the Alpha King's composure truly break. Mother? He whispers. Chapter 17. The Queen Mother's Gambit. Mother? Richard's voice is a strangled whisper that has no business coming from an Alpha King. He takes a step back, his arm dropping from my waist. It's the first time in hours I haven't felt his touch, and the absence is as cold as the wind from the balcony. The woman in the elevator steps into the penthouse. She doesn't look like a mother. She looks like a CEO checking into her own hostile takeover. Her blonde hair is pulled back so tightly it must be painful, and her eyes, the same dark, predatory shade as Richard's, scan the room like a thermal scope. They land on the green silk dress discarded on the floor, then on the two of us, and finally on the leather book on the marble island. A razor-thin smile appears on her face. Richard, she says, her voice a chillingly calm soprano. You always did have a problem with clutter.
What are you doing here, Elowen? Richard asks, his composure slowly returning, though he still hasn't moved back to my side. I'm here for my property, Elowen says, walking toward the marble island with a slow, deliberate click of her heels. And I see you found yourself a new pet. A detective, no less. You always were partial to strays. She isn't a stray, Mother, Richard growls, a low rumble of warning returning to his chest. And she isn't a pet. Anika Gray is a liability, Elowen interjects, reaching for the book, and she's the reason the High Magistrate is threatening to glass this entire mountain. She picks up the ledger, her fingers caressing the leather cover. I see Richard tense, his muscles locking up. I don't know what's in that book, but it's enough to make an alpha king flinch. You're not taking that, I say, stepping forward. My wolf-breaker instinct is kicking in again, ignoring the fact that I'm wearing a rumpled silk dress and have no badge. Elowen turns to me, her eyes widening slightly. Oh, she speaks. How quaint. Anika, stay back, Richard warns, his voice tight. No, I say, looking Elowen dead in the eye. I just spent 12 hours being cuffed to this man, chased through caves, and scented by a council of cranky shifters. I'm done staying back. If that book is important enough to get me hunted, I want to know why. Elowen looks at me for a long moment, a slow, assessing smile spreading across her face. You have fire, detective. I'll give you that. Richard always did like them spirited. She tosses the ledger onto the marble counter, where it lands with a heavy thud. It falls open to a page filled with rows of names and numbers. It's a list, Anika, Elowen says. A list of every shifter currently embedded in the human government. The High Magistrate didn't want Richard arrested because he's too powerful. He wanted him arrested because he's the only one who has this. I walk over to the book and look down. My breath catches. I see names I recognize. Detectives, judges, senators, people I've worked with, people I trusted. Why do you have this, Richard? I ask, my voice barely a whisper. Because it's my protection, Richard says, finally walking over to me. He stands beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, but he doesn't reach out. And because it's the only way to ensure the safety of my pack. By blackmailing the government? I look up at him, the betrayal a bitter taste in my mouth. By keeping them honest, Richard corrects. He stole it from me, Elowen says, her voice laced with a strange mixture of pride and malice. I curated this list for 20 years. It was my life's work, and my ungrateful son took it the moment he ascended to the throne. It wasn't your work, Mother, Richard snarls. It was a leash. You were using our own people to control the humans. I took it to free them. And now you're using it to protect your human pet, Elowen sneers. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out a small black flash drive. The magistrate has a deal for you, Richard. You give me the book and the drive with the digital copy, and you get to keep your little detective. And your mountain. Richard looks at the book, then at me. I see the calculation in his eyes, the weight of the crown he carries. And if I don't? Richard asks. Then the magistrate authorizes a full-scale sanitization protocol, Elowen says, starting with this penthouse, and everyone in it. Richard doesn't move. He doesn't speak. He just looks at me, a silent question in his eyes. He's asking me to choose again. The book or us?
He won't give you the book, I say, my voice steady. I reach out and take Richard's hand, intertwining our fingers. The warmth of his skin is the only anchor I have, and neither will I. Elowen laughs, a cold, sharp sound. Oh, you'll give it to me, Anika, because you have something I want. She pulls out her phone and taps the screen. A live video feed appears. It shows a familiar office, my old office at the precinct. Captain Miller is tied to a chair, his face bruised, with 2 large shifters standing over him. The High Magistrate is very efficient, Elowen says. He figured if he couldn't get to you, he'd get to the next best thing. I look at the screen, my heart stopping. Captain Miller, he's the closest thing I have to family. Richard, I whisper. Richard looks at the screen, then at the book. The muscles in his jaw are working furiously. He's trapped. We're trapped. The choice is yours, King, Elowen says, her voice like ice. The ledger or the captain? You have 10 minutes. And then she does something I didn't see coming. She smiles at me. And Anika, you might want to check your wrist. I look down. Around my right wrist, the one that was free, there's a new silver cuff. I didn't feel her put it on. It's smaller, sleeker, but it feels even heavier. Elowen holds up her own wrist. There's a matching cuff on hers. I didn't come here to negotiate, she says. I came to ensure my investment. Welcome to the family, Detective. The Alpha's Decree. The silver around my right wrist is cold, but the fury vibrating off Richard is hot enough to melt the glass walls of the penthouse. Richard Walton, the Queen Mother, and apparently the architect of my current life crisis, is looking at me like I'm a fascinating bug she's just pinned to a board. She's cuffed to me, thinking she's captured a pawn. She hasn't realized she's just walked into the cage with the one person who knows exactly how to break a wolf. 10 minutes, Richard, Elowen repeats, her voice as smooth as a funeral shroud. The captain's life for the ledger. It's a generous trade, considering the detective is currently surplus to requirements. Richard doesn't look at the screen where Miller is being held. He doesn't look at the ledger. He looks at Elowen with a gaze so dark and heavy, it feels like the room is losing oxygen. You think a silver chain makes you my equal, Mother? Richard asks, his voice a low, terrifying hum. You think because you share my blood, you can dictate who stands at my side? I think I'm the only one ensuring your survival, she counters. I don't wait for Richard to move. If there's one thing I've learned about the Walton family, it's that they love a dramatic monologue. I, however, am a detective. I prefer tactical efficiency. I jerk the silver chain between Elowen and me, catching her off balance. She's strong, but she's not expecting me to lunge toward the counter instead of away from her. Anika! Richard growls. I grab the ledger with my free hand. Elowen tries to wrench my arm back, but I use my weight, and the momentum of the green silk dress, to pin her hand against the marble island. Listen to me, Queen Mother, I hiss, my face inches from hers. You think you know how this ends? You think Richard is going to choose between his mentor and his mate? You clearly don't know your son as well as I do. Richard is beside us in a heartbeat. He doesn't touch his mother. He doesn't have to. The sheer physical weight of his alpha presence is enough to make Elowen's confidence flicker. He places his large, warm hand over mine on the ledger. The ledger is gone, Richard says. He doesn't wait for an explanation. With a strength that makes the air crackle, he rips the book in half. Not just the cover. He shreds the ancient leather and the pages of names with a raw, savage finality.
He throws the remnants into the fireplace where the embers of our earlier scenting night are still glowing. "What have you done?" Elowen gasps, her eyes wide. "That was your leverage, your safety." "No," Richard rumbles, his arm hooking around my waist and pulling both me and the woman cuffed to me toward him. "That was a leash, and I'm done being led. My safety isn't in a book. It's in the woman who was brave enough to hunt me." He looks at the tablet showing Miller. "Release him, Garrow," Richard commands. "Now, or I come down to that office and I show the pack exactly what happens to those who threaten the law of the mate." On the screen, Garrow pauses. He looks at Richard, then at the fire where the ledger is turning to ash. He sees the absolute certainty in the king's eyes. Without a word, he signals the guards. Miller is untied. The feed cuts to black. Elowen looks at the broken silver between Richard's feet, the pieces he snapped on the ridge, and then at the cuff connecting her to me. She sees the fire in my eyes and the unshakable dominance in her son's. "You're a fool, Richard," she whispers. "You've chosen a human over your heritage." "I've chosen a future over a fossil," Richard counters. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out the small gold key Julian gave him. He doesn't give it to me this time. He unlocks the cuff on Elowen's wrist himself, his movements slow and deliberate. "Leave," Richard says. "The mountain is no longer your den. If I see you again, I won't be a son. I'll be the alpha you taught me to be." Elowen stands up, her composure shattered. She looks at me one last time, a look of begrudging respect buried under layers of ice, and then walks toward the elevator. The doors close, and the silence that follows is the first true peace I've felt since I stormed into this office. I look at Richard. He's standing there, his chest heaving, looking every bit the king who just burned his kingdom to save his heart. "You destroyed the list," I say, my voice a whisper. "The magistrate will come for you." "Let them come," Richard says, turning me in his arms. "They don't have a warrant anymore, and they don't have you." He reaches for my right wrist and unlocks the final silver cuff. He drops it on the floor, where it hits the marble with a dull, forgotten thud. "I'm out of a job, Richard," I remind him, leaning my head against his bare chest. "I'm a rogue detective with no badge and a very expensive taste in green silk." "You're a queen, Anika," he whispers, his hand sliding up to cup my face. "And as for the Wolfbreaker title, I think you've earned a promotion." "To what?" "To the woman who finally took the king into custody. Permanently." He leans down, and this time, there are no interruptions. No councils, no mothers, no extractors. Just the heat, the scent of cedar and rain, and the raw, primal surrender of two alphas who finally found their match. The kiss is the end of the investigation and the beginning of everything else. I came here to put him in a cage, but I ended up finding the only place I've ever felt free. As Richard picks me up and carries me toward the bed, I realize my captain was right. My impulsiveness did get me into a situation I couldn't shoot my way out of, but I wouldn't trade it for all the silver in the world.